Coming to that, I request you to stay on with us as we're tracking some fresh developments. We're now learning that Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has stated that Tehran would rebuild its nuclear facilities with greater strength while maintaining that the country is not seeking to develop nuclear weapons. He has made these remarks during a visit to Iran's Atomic Energy Organization, where he met senior officials from the country's nuclear sector. His comments have come after US President Donald Trump warned that he would order new strikes if Iran tried to restart facilities that were bombed by the United States in June. Washington has claimed that those sites were part of a weapons program, a charge that Tehran continues to deny, insisting that its nuclear activities are for civilian and health-related purposes as well. In fact, Pezeshkian has stated that destroying buildings and factories would not weaken Iran's resolve and that the country would rebuild and move forward with greater determination. We all remember how back in June, the United States had struck 3 nuclear facilities within Iran, in Natanz, Isfahan and in Fordo. They had claimed to use bunker busters, but Iran so far has struck a very positive tone, stating that its facilities have largely remained intact and it intends on rebuilding. With us on the broadcast still is Mr. Mohammad Osman. Thank you so much for staying with us as we track these developments. I wanted to understand from you, what do you make of the tone and tenor that Pezeshkian has adopted over here? His very tough statement. What sort of a message is he trying or signal is he trying to give the world, particularly the E3 powers and Washington?
Well, we've all heard and read reports, Pia, that the United States is approaching Iran once more to negotiate. And there are many sources that do verify that the United States is doing just that, and that they are pushing at the moment for more negotiations instead of going back to military escalation once again. And it seems that the Iranians, of course, are upping the ante a bit in order to improve their negotiating position by making such hardline statements. Also, the other day, a very senior Iranian official, former Iranian official, a former advisor to the Grand Ayatollah, the supreme leader of Iran, and also he is very close to the decision-making circles, said that Iran, if Iran wishes, it can build the nuclear bomb within 2 weeks if the Ayatollah revokes the fatwa. Of course, this is a very provocative and inflammatory statement, and it seems that it is designed and projected in order to improve Iran's negotiating position and prove that Iran is not weakened. But if anything, this reeks of weakness, Pia, because Iran right now is in its weakest state maybe since the Iranian Revolution of 1979. The Iranian regime is hanging by a threshold. It's by a thread, excuse me, and it seems that they are subjected to very strong sanctions by the United Nations after the E3, of course, reactivated the sanctions, and of course the Americans are also tightening their embargo on Iran. However, on the other hand, it seems that the United States is not interested in pushing for escalation once again in the Middle East at the moment. They have just frozen the conflict in Gaza.
Yes.
Trump claims to be leading a peace process over there, so it wouldn't seem logical for them to start another war with Iran now.
Indeed, and speaking of sanctions, of course, a lot of experts have doubted that it will hit the Iranian economy hard. You have mentioned that there are dissenting elements within Iran against the regime itself, and it's not enjoyed as much popularity right now as it has in the past. So factoring in all of this, despite backing from Russia and China, how long do you think Iran can hold on to get an advantageous position in negotiations with the United States? Of course, the US is trying to enter into talks once again, talks that US stalled, in fact, earlier when the war between Iran and Israel broke out and US then carried out these strikes.
It seems that the question of Iran's economic isolation, of course, is not as a given, as people might expect, because actually 120 countries, including, of course, Russia and China, and all the countries of the non-aligned movement, have said that the sanctions are null and void now, and they will not be applied anymore, because basically they do not believe that the snapback mechanism was activated legally, because they see that two of the main counterparts of the Iran nuclear deal, that is China and Russia, refuse the reimposition of sanctions on Iran. And many countries around the world do reject that as well. So it does not see, and I think that in the next weeks and months, China and Russia will increase their economic support, and even also Russia, especially its military support to Iran, in order to improve its negotiating position. However, at the same time, China and Russia do not wish to see another war with Iran, because they believe, and many people believe, including myself, that Iran cannot stand another war with Israel and the United States. It could actually lead to the regime collapse, even though the last war by Israel on Iran did consolidate or did push the Iranian public to support the government against a foreign aggression, of course, because Iran is a nation state. It's an old civilization, and people do have a very strong sense of national pride. So they don't want to see the regime changed by a gunship or an airstrike, rather. They would like to see that happen, the opponents of the regime, through peaceful means. So it doesn't seem that this is, but however, the economic sanctions do kick in, and the Russians and the Chinese are unable to keep Iran alive economically, keep the lifeline connected to the Iranian economy. This could actually lead to domestic unrest, which could lead to severe challenges that could pose an existential threat to the regime.
Indeed, and I also wanted to get an understanding from you regarding the IAEA's role itself. We do know earlier that Iran had declared the agreement that was then, the understanding at least that was brought about in Cairo earlier, as invalid with regards to the IAEA's monitoring. Would they go ahead with this stance, or after these facilities are rebuilt, there is some scope for the International Atomic Energy Agency to then sort of monitor what's taking place in Iran?
Well, as you very well know, Pia, before the snapback mechanism came into effect, was activated by the Europeans, Egypt mediated an agreement between the IAEA and Iran to resume cooperation. This was because the cooperation, of course, ceased practically after the Israeli aggression on Iran. So there was room for the resumption of cooperation, and actually visits were carried out to Iran by inspectors of the IAEA. However, with the activation, of course, of the snapback mechanism, Iran declared the deal that was mediated in Cairo null and void, unfortunately. And of course, this was provoked by the Europeans. The Europeans, Pia, are acting, unfortunately, in a very irresponsible manner that serves to foment instability in the Middle East and push Iran to a war footing once again with the United States and Israel. Instead of supporting the diplomatic process that was going on, they decided to derail the entire process. Now, discussions and consultations have restarted, according to many reports, between the International Atomic Agency and Iran. So it seems that Iran might be open somewhere down the line to the resumption of cooperation and the inspections, especially if the United States and Iran engage in indirect or direct negotiations once more. This could lead to the Iran loosening the restrictions it has placed on the IAEA inspections. However, at the same time, there are very strong, we have to understand, Pia, that there are divisions within the Iranian regime. So we have a very moderate president and a very moderate cabinet at this point. But of course, the Grand Ayatollah, he leans more towards the conservative and the hardline camp inside Iran, which is represented by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and other institutions. And those guys, the conservatives and the hardliners, are pushing for a more hardline position, where the moderates are struggling to maintain diplomacy at this point. So we will have to see who will prevail in the coming days, whether the moderates will prevail in resuming the diplomatic process so that these negotiations can go back on track and a peaceful resolution can be attained to the Iran nuclear issue and to Iran's role even in the region as a whole, or will things go back to the once again to escalation, and we will see another Iranian-Israeli war or an American war in Israel, which another American war in Iran, which is, by the way, unfortunately very, very plausible at somewhere down the line in the next month or maybe a couple of years.
All right, sir. With that, I would like to thank you for taking out time and, of course, sharing your analysis with us on NewsX World. With that, viewers, we're shifting focus to some domestic political developments coming in from the United States of America. Former U.S. President Barack Obama has now slammed